food and energy, that is lights on, dinner on the table, food in the fridge, warmth in the house, security, physical comfort, power for whatever we need to plug in. There are probably very few things we take for granted more than that. And yet, having enough food and energy is very recent history for us humans. Securing it, harnessing the resources is probably the oldest and the longest struggle in the world, trying to keep our bodies going and to keep us warm. And we learned to control fire at least 400,000 years ago. Pretty incredible, because that's pretty damn ingenious, I think. But possibly actually 1 million years ago. That's debatable, but possibly as long ago as 1 million years ago. And yet, we were hunter-gatherers until only about 5,000 years ago. So we did not figure out how to make our food in a way that's predictable and halfway reliable for hundreds of thousands of years after we discovered fire. So agriculture as well took tens of thousands of years. It first appeared about 23,000 years ago. The Egyptians figured out how to make it in big amounts about 10,000 years ago. But again, it's about 5,000 years ago that we started looking at farming as something that could surpass hunting and gathering. So truly, truly recent history for us. And when it happened, it was a big moment for us. We started to settle down, and that means we could finally have a home. It's also the beginning of culture. Those of you who read parts of Genesis and remember the section that talks about going forth, multiplying, and conquering the earth, that line, John Paul II reminds us, is the beginning of culture. That's the beginning of human culture. That is how the process started. And again, that over thousands of years slowly gave it first only a few, then some, then finally many of us leisure time. Time to think, time to invent, time to innovate, create, debate, strategize wars, basically shape our destinies, go beyond survival and start to shape how we live. Many still toiled, food continued to be scarce, hunger common, and sources of energy and comfort remained luxuries. And it is because of that, famously, that just as things were going to get better, the English economist Malthus feared that population growth will always eliminate any gains in our ability to produce food and feed ourselves and make any real progress in raising the standard of living impossible. New mouths to feed, he believed, meant never-ending scarcity of limited resources. Instead, we just learned to bake a bigger cake. Agricultural revolution and steam engine-fueled industrial revolution started in Malthus's lifetime and ran from about the mid-18th to late 19th century. It proved all his theories wrong. But that won't stop neo-Malthusians from telling us about population bomb and other things, even now when we're clearly facing a crisis in births. Reliable and affordable and plentiful energy is a recent phenomenon, but when we take it for granted, we really forget how recent. We forget it has a history because it's basically an always around us. And yet it wasn't until the 20th century, that's when most of us were born. It's incredible that I say that, but it's the time when it's just most people, not all people. That is when basically reliable power, thanks to fossil fuel, the addition of fossil fuel to our repertoire, and later gas, went online. It was a leap in the standard of living. That's cooking, warmth, machines, everything that gets powered. In safety, that was huge. We can turn on the light. The streets were not dark. Darkness is never our friend. Bad things happen in the darkness. We all walk to the light. And security. You need power to fuel military equipment, to power expeditionary forces, to have planes, cars, airplanes. So a really, really good thing to have enough energy. Some 85% of our energy needs are, bear with me, I'm almost done with it. This is ridiculously shallow. It actually is, but anyway, I don't want to put you to sleep, but about 85% of our energy needs are still met by fossil fuel. And this is after the trillions of dollars spent on energy transition. All those years and all the transitioning gave us a reduction in about 2%. We're just not there. So nuclear energy came online in the 1950s. It's a very reliable source for naval propulsion, thanks to one man, one admiral who believed in it and made it happen. And it's the most sustainable, completely clean, and a completely clean source of energy. All renewables are not only a blip on the map of our needs, but they're also intermittent and require a backup. So it's really great for all those who have renewable ambitions to have a backup that produces nothing really, except for fuel that's spent that we're increasingly learning to reuse. So it's actually, nuclear can be a very interesting thing long term. But meanwhile, it wasn't until the Green Revolution, which is very recent, after World War II, and one American, Norman Borlaug, who at first started working for the military and then just working on crops and crop protection and production that can be maximized so that very hungry world after World War II can be fed. The world that wouldn't be fed would mean revolutions and would mean the Russians would have won before we even started. And they really made a valiant effort at destabilizing Europe through destabilizing food production. So this was no doubt a big deal and no doubt one of the reasons why the military was involved in it. So the technology behind that progress is all the things that everyday newspapers now tell you we need to eliminate because the planet. That's fertilizers, pesticides, irrigation, mechanization into which things have to be poured to make them run. So that's the technology behind our progress. Without the use of fertilizers or pesticides, without constant technological advances, everything can be reversed. That's in agriculture. Like forget gas and oil. This is advances in biology, in what to do to protect things that try to grow and have to be protected over a growth cycle. So yes, science is real. And Green Revolution contributed not to climate change, but to widespread eradication of poverty, to averted hunger for millions, raised incomes, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, reduced land use for agriculture, which means we stopped cutting out trees. And it contributed to declines in infant mortality. And by the way, better standard of living seems to be the best natural way to reduce births for anybody who is concerned about births. When we know that our children won't die in the first 5 years of their lives, it's not, every mother doesn't try to spend every fertile minute trying to make sure that she has enough to survive her and the children's father. It used to be really brutal. We really need to, I recommend travels in the developing world. I'm not being sarcastic, because it's heart-wrenching, actually, quite often. It's beautiful, but boy, cruel. So you would think that by the 60s, we would thank God and think everything is going well and the challenge to energy and food security is finally resolved. Well, it could, but that's not the direction in which we're going. Technology in agriculture made it possible to stop deforestation, shrink the arable land, maximize yield, engage in till-free farming. Just imagine, we don't have to turn the soil over and release carbon nowadays because there's a way to coat the seeds that makes it possible for the seed not to be eaten and to develop into a plant without a plow going through and releasing carbon. I think it's incredible. I don't entirely understand the science, but I know that that's the case. I saw it. I can't do the chemical chains behind what goes under on the seed. And if you thought about it, you guessed it, that coating is being challenged. State by state in the United States, already made illegal in some countries in Europe, because pollinators save the bees. The bees are not dying. That's a separate story and not for this, but they are really not dying. And those coatings are very often used for plants that are pollinated by the wind, and the winds come nowhere near. So there's a lot more nonsense behind it. But anyway, this is just about pushback that gets reduced to climate denialism. It's not climate denialism. It's biology, and it's actually the famous science, just without the hashtag. So all that we can do because of sophisticated crop protection, because of sophisticated, increasingly sophisticated genetic engineering, and fertilizers. So it's thanks to advanced high-tech agriculture, not organic farming, which is far less, like to the tune of 30% efficient, that requires more land to produce the same amount of food, that would require cutting national forests. The difference in productivity would be so huge that we would not be able to keep the same country. But hey, climate change. The assault on both energy, fossil fuel in particular, and agriculture, ironically, is being launched for the sake of the planet, where all these technological advances, which allowed us, for instance, not to burn biofuel, by far the worst thing we can do to the planet. And again, agriculture and food production for 8 billion people without increasing arable land. It's actually nothing short of a scientific miracle. So climate emergency became something that's weaponized as though there were anybody on the planet that doesn't care about the planet. I've never met that person yet. And if you have, I'm actually serious, I'd like to meet them. Weaponizing that climate emergency is exactly when we come to that fall in my title. That weaponization threatens food security in the West and energy security worldwide while managing to remain largely under the radar. I don't really read people writing about it. This isn't cover news. This isn't front cover. And if left unchecked, our current climate-driven policy trajectory will literally lead us to a future that's quite literally dark, cold, hungry, and as the Polish farmers during their protests reminded those limousine liberals, and sober. That future will be very sober. There will be nothing to make that alcohol out of. And you would think that the Malthusian argument, anyway, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to backtrack just slightly. The reason why it's exasperating is because it's harm that's self-inflicted. These are regulatory attacks, activist attacks, fueled by really huge amounts of money, of families as powerful as, say, the Gettys. Really, really, really large amounts of money. And the West really can commit suicide if they listen to those groups. So you would think that the Malthusian argument lost actually in his lifetime when the Industrial Revolution started. But no, it returned as the Extinction Rebellion. It is very much the same ideology. At the same time, first, we can make enough food. Second, birth stabilizes, the standard of living goes up. So now the Luddites are having a go where Malthusians failed. And what does it mean? What do they want? No modern agriculture. As I was saying, new pollinator laws are eliminating things that make till-free, non-carbon releasing farming possible. Glyphosate. It's a herbicide that allows the things that we eat not to be killed by the things we cannot eat. Completely benign, but a report from a really preposterous organization in Paris that said that it was carcinogenic. They review various studies and target various things. Your cell phones are carcinogenic. Red meat is carcinogenic. Coffee is carcinogenic. I think those were not popular targets because it was too difficult an argument to make to get a crowd onto that bandwagon. But you say something like glyphosate, sounds good, right? I mean, it must be awful, sounds chemical. So them finding through a review of existing studies, which means the studies were always there, nobody found a problem. The product is approved by the EPA. It's in wide use. You have it in your garages and in your kitchens, not unlikely. No, it's a carcinogen, which triggers California Proposition 65, and that's how California rules the world. They say it's carcinogenic, lawsuits start. Lawsuit starts, and then companies that make this thing that does that nothing else can do is hit to date with $10 billion. And these are, yes, it's lawful. The other thing, no fracking. Again, 86% of our energy from gas and oil. So imagine, let's do away with fracking. No nuclear. Why? Because Soviet active measures that go back to our ginormous head start over them in nuclear energy is something that people actually believe. And movies that Jane Fonda made, China Syndrome, whatnot, this is actually the reality of nuclear energy that many Americans somehow, for some terrible, intellectually sad reasons, is still the paradigm that they have in their head. They think it's dangerous. Chernobyl was dangerous because they did not have the technology to fly that close to the sun. American technologies are better. They still are. I mean, with negative selection, God knows we may catch up with them, and we're trying. But as long as we promote excellence, we're really, really doing well. We're fine. This is a very, very big and very smart country with people who are passionate about things, being able to return into the system through community colleges, through small companies that take a chance on somebody smart and not credentialed, through mentors. And I am not worried about this country, but get out of its way. And then there's just stop oil. And just to make things really simple, because nobody quite understands what's in oil, well, just stop carbon dioxide. I hope you all know what you breathe out. I hope this is like, I'm not breaking news right now. That, you know, therefore, like taxing lungs, why not? I mean, maybe it won't be popular, but at the time when that tax comes, you know, sky's the limit. Why not? I grew up in a communist country. I was born in a country that was going through a revolution. Trust me, you can make anybody do anything because you simply take everything else away. So these are not weird stories. And we learn from Americans' reaction to political correctness, to the last few years of making people confess this and that, post this and that square. Courage is in short supply. And it's a human problem, not an Eastern European problem. In fact, they're showing themselves to be crazier than ever. We do not like to stand out. We do not like to stand up. We do not like to cross anybody. We're not just herd animals, we're social animals. It is normal and natural for us to want to get along. Even bullies need following. They don't just rave around and torment people with nobody watching. The whole fun is in their power being witnessed. And nobody enjoys challenging that power. So if you think it won't happen here, I'm sorry. It's the same human body, genetically compatible. Anything that could be done to somebody anywhere in the world can be done to you. It's a question of, that's something Rachel Bovard did not get right. There are Rubicons to be crossed. There really are. And I shudder to think, but no, we have not crossed all of them. There are plenty left. We're still civilized. Seriously, even bad manners, we're still civilized. We recognize bad manners as bad manners. That's something. So yeah, CO2 is a toxin, and photosynthesis, well, let's just forget it. And let's forget the fact that when more carbon dioxide goes out, more is absorbed. Plants like it. They grow faster, they grow better. Like everything else, it's the amount that matters. This goes back to the Middle Ages, to Paracelsus. The dose makes the toxin. The dose makes the poison. Water can kill you. Fire can kill you. Everything can kill us in certain amounts. We just want to stay away from things that take almost nothing to kill us, and not from things that would really take preposterous and practically difficult to impossible circumstances to absorb and keep them around us. I like sun. I like vitamin D. I recommend vitamin D. I'm not endorsing vitamin D. So the consequences of the above are hard to overstate, hence the title, How We Will Engineer Our Own Fall. Dismantling agricultural product pipeline with lawsuits against technology, discouraging innovation, is a very long time problem, and it will take a long time to fix if we succeed. Any infrastructural long-term decisions take a long, long time to repair. It's not just, let's get another administration. It will take a generational, multi-generational commitment to fix some of that stuff. And I'm not even talking about the fact that most people don't want to talk about it because they're afraid of being dismissed as climate denialist. Neglecting the grid. How long do you think it will take to, fix the grid if we mess it up? It's not going to be 5 minutes. It's not going to be 4 years. It's going to be like going from undeveloped to developed. God help us. Power plants take time. We know that we need right now we know, everybody knows that we need nuclear. And what does it mean? 40 years before the next plant goes online? A long time. A lifetime. So just stop oil. What does it mean? What does it mean exactly? What would happen exactly if we stopped oil? And this is not just, let's imagine that we have some magical power, it's Star Trek, and we constructed something out of ships and they all beam in, and everything that's running, lights flicker for a moment, but then some little creature gets into the walls and power is just coursing through the veins of the building, no problem. So what would we lose? Okay, it's not just cars and airplanes and ships. We would have to say goodbye to modern medicine, literally. Modern chemistry would not be without it. We would have to say goodbye to disposable equipment. And that's not the cups, which I actually hate, but it's not the cups, it's not the utensils. It's the machines in hospitals that are equipment that goes into your veins, things that only you get so that you do not get an infection from the previous guy who has something horrible in his blood and will kill you if it gets into yours. We don't have to worry about it. We have a whole bunch of equipment that comes from oil or from gas. It's plastic, it's brand new, it's antiseptic, it is just for you to keep you safe. Say bye-bye to that thing. I don't know how you're going to deal with glass, wood, and steel. You certainly will have to boil it for a long time, and some things you simply won't be able to do. There will be no cameras that can curve into your veins and fix your heart. There will be none of the miracles that we're now witnessing, because we are witnessing nothing short of miracles. The lives we can save, people who can be born, diseases that can be defeated, another thing we take for granted. That is not real. That only happens here. It doesn't even happen in Europe in many cases. There are Europeans who are happy that they were diagnosed with cancer when the spouse was posted, or they themselves, in the United States. And they became the beneficiaries of private medicine with the best the human mind could invent. It's an incredible thing we have here in oil. But then let's keep going. So no infection prevention. Also, no high-performance clothing, no tents, no good shoes, no underwear that stretches. Remember, no socks that stay on. You go back to garters. No Gore-Tex, no high-performance skis, no snowboards, no skateboards, no, I mean, should I keep going? No toys? You know, all the things that some parents with exasperation refer to as cheap crap. Some of it is not cheap and it's not crap. It's pretty amazing. So all of that, do say goodbye to that. Now it gets better. I have 2 kids, no disposable nappies. They're big. But no disposable nappies, no bottles, no all the other things that you can give to your child to bite on. And it's, say, not a battery, which I saw in Asia, really interesting. You know, double, triple A's for teething children. I mean, good luck telling those mothers that it's not a good idea. It's something they can do, and we do the things that we can do. We choose as long as we have choices. And at a certain point, we have no choices, and then we don't care what it is. And then no modern agriculture, because no fertilizers, and no coatings, and no delivery devices to all these things that can dissolve and let chemicals that we also won't have into the earth. And by the way, natural, anything natural means it's something dead. So if you like your whales, if you like your turtles and tortoises, if you like your ivory on your elephants, say goodbye to that as well, because it will be needed elsewhere. If we don't do synthetic, we will do natural. Natural is hunted and killed and harvested instead of man-made, with a price, with abundance, and environmental stewardship awareness in mind. Oh, and by the way, no computers, no computer screens, no keyboards, and no those little things that the smart part of the computer is attached to, because that too, whether it's silicon, some type of carbide, whatever it is, those things, bye-bye. Okay, so I'll do the last thing, and I will let you go actually to net zero, because this is where we're going. This is the last thing, and I'm going to compress it. I thought I was lower on time, but I think I keep adding things from I thought I was fine with time, sorry. Thank you. So here's the problem with all of it. It's not just that it's a big lie that we can do without those things and live. There is nobody on the planet, even the most ardent proponents of all these climate-friendly, supposedly, measures, who will argue that we do not need fossil fuel. It's a lot worse than that. We say it so that we could close it down domestically, and we lose the choice. We become reliant on imports, and those imports come from very unsavory places. If you think about the war in Ukraine right now, well, it started by Germany created a market for Russia, for Russia's oil and gas, with Germany being their sales and marketing department, and bypassing East Central Europe, dumping on Poland for building an LNG terminal. If you were wondering why Poland was a black sheep, it's the LNG terminal, it's the modular reactors, it's the energy policy that basically decentralized energy distribution in Europe and was really looking after people, the peoples of Eastern Europe, whom they did not want dependent on Russia. There was no way not to be dependent because Western Europe would not let them wean themselves of Russian sources of energy and instead wanted them to go straight to green, like Africa. So what happens is we basically outsource the smokestacks and keep getting, because we need it, the energy. So the result is that the Greens are happy because they don't see the smokestacks, and we empower and make rich our worst enemies. That's where Iran comes in and becomes interesting, and that is when Russia is really interesting. Really, really something to think about. Do look on the map when you read the news. Not just a little thing that you're discovering for the first time, the insert. Look at the globe. See where it is. Look at the geography and look at the physical part of the map and look at the resources. It's glaring every time. So when you hear about net zero, and I'm going to hand over to Myron, when you hear about net zero and successes of net zero, in the United Kingdom, in any place, it simply means that we outsourced the fumes to places that do not have EPA, that do not have labor laws, that don't give a damn about human rights, and we make them rich and ourselves dependent on them for, as I said, about 85% of our energy. So that is net zero. The countries that are going most green, Germany, the UK, are contributing the most to the greenhouse gases emission. Here is another news flash. It is one atmosphere above that one planet. It doesn't matter where you spew out the dirt. It does matter that in the process of pretending that you don't, you destroy the best jobs for people who did or did not go to college. That does matter, because that is another thing you export to those rather awful places. So it doesn't have to be like that. We have the technology. We need to have the courage to start talking about it without being afraid of being called out for climate denialism. I'm not a climate denier. I'm a total tree hugger. I also know that we're being lied to. And this is the better way to use our minds to do what the Bible told us to do. Go forth and multiply and conquer the earth. We're the stewards of it, and it doesn't matter if it's 5,000 miles away in places with concentration camps. It still goes up. And it goes up and then around and comes to us. So I'll let Myron take the net zero.